How's it going, everyone? This is Adam from Slurve. Ship my money on DraftKings, and I'll be breaking down today's pitching slate for you. I'm going to start out with what I plan on doing in cash games today, and then I'll move into some GPP options that carry a little more risk but have some upside. A lot today depends on the weather. If everything's good, then John Lester is my favorite cash pitcher today. He's priced at $11,800 on DraftKings, $11,000 on FanDuel, and against the Padres team that struggles I think he's the safest option out of Kluber, Strasburg, and Lester. He so far dating back to last year, he gives up a 286 WOBA, 324 xFIP, and strikes out about 24% of right-handed batters. The Padres are a right-handed heavy lineup. So far this year, they've got an 89 WRC plus and strike out 23.8% of the time against lefties. So I think that's just a pretty safe matchup for Lester, and he's going to be my top cash game option. If I do play cash games today, I'm not going to be playing on DraftKings because their pricing is pretty good for hitters, and there's not a lot of cheaper pitchers that I trust today. I'll be limiting my cash game action to FanDuel, where I can just go with Lester and not worry about anyone else, and Fantasy Aces, where I can fit two of the top pitchers and then still fit in pretty much any of the hitters that I want. If there is rain in the Cubs game, then Strasburg becomes my number one cash game option. He's facing a Tigers team who has some good hitters, but it's in Washington, which isn't a great hitter's park. The Tigers so far this year, they have a 104 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, but they've struck out about 23.4% of the time, and Strasburg's just an elite option. He strikes out like 30% of right-handed batters he faces. The Tigers are a right-handed heavy lineup. The Tigers are a right-handed heavy lineup, so I think he's the safest option outside of Lester. For cash games, I like Kluber, but the Astros strike out a little bit more than the Tigers, but it's also a better hitting environment, and they hit a little bit better overall. So Strasburg's definitely my cash game option if Lester's unavailable. For GPPs, again, it depends on the weather. If Lester's game is going to get in, I think his ownership will be really high because of that matchup with the Padres. So on a site like FanDuel, where he's priced exactly the same as Strasburg, I'm going to go Strasburg. Just because I think there'll be a big ownership difference. If that game isn't going to play, then I think that ownership will just kind of shift to Kluber and Strasburg, and they'll both just be really highly owned. Where there could be an exception still, I think, is I could see on DraftKings a lot of ownership shifting to Strasburg because Kluber's like $2,000 more. So if that's going to be the case, I'm going to find a way to get to Kluber because he's got the same upside. And if I can get him at a fraction of the ownership, then I'm going to try and do that. Moving outside of the top options for GPPs, I like Matt Moore today at 7,600 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel going against the Mariners. Dating back to last year, the Mariners have a 120 or 104 WRC plus and a 21.6% strikeout rate against lefties. But you have to remember that last year Nelson Cruz was healthy and absolutely crushing the ball, and Franklin Gutierrez was having a great year. Right now, Nelson Cruz is questionable to play. If he does play, he's still banged up. He's got an injured forearm. And Franklin Gutierrez has been really bad. So they're not the same team right now that they were last year against left-handed pitching. And Matt Moore has looked really good this year. He got blown up last start when he was really popular, so that'll probably keep his ownership down a little bit. But so far this year, he's got a 3.57 xFIP and has struck out 24.2% of the batters he faces. So I'm definitely interested in. He's definitely my favorite mid-tier pitcher today, going up against the Mariners. Moving to other mid-tier options, if the game in Minnesota looks okay, I like Jose Berrios at 7,000 on DraftKings, facing an Orioles team that can hit the ball, but he's just got a ton of upside. It's a negative park shift for the Orioles going from Camden Yards to Minnesota. Small sample size, obviously, for Berrios. He's only made 2 starts, but he struck out 30% of the batters he faces, which is in line with his minor league numbers. He has the stuff to strike guys out, and at 7,000 on a day where there's just a lot of risky options on two pitcher sites, he's someone I'm definitely interested in against an Orioles team that struck out about 22% of the time against right-handed pitching so far this year. If the weather in that game is going to be an issue, then I don't mind Mike Fiers against the Indians. He definitely carries a lot of risk pitching in that ballpark. He's only got a 1.27 ground ball to fly ball ratio, so he's going to give up a good amount of fly balls. But the Indians so far this year have been pretty league average against right-handed pitching. They've got a 99 WRC plus, but the thing that stands out is they've struck out 23.4% of the time. Fiers hasn't shown great strikeout stuff so far this year, only striking out about 18.5% of the batters he faces. But going back to last year, he strikes out about 21% of lefties and 23% of righties. So the strikeout stuff, has always been there for him. And I think this is a matchup where he could see an uptick in strikeouts from what he's had this year just because the Indians have been striking out so much. So, it's definitely a risky play, but I think it's an interesting play, especially because his ownership would be very, very low since, there are things working against him like the park and his strikeout numbers being down, combined with he's facing Corey Kluber. So he's an underdog and, people are going to have Kluber. So he's at least an interesting GPP play for me, I think. He's not at the top of my list, but he's someone that I'll be thinking more about throughout the day and might end up with some exposure to. If I decide to really punt pitcher, I'm not opposed to going with one of the top pitchers and then throwing a dart at Dan Straley pitching against the Pirates at 4,900. It's not a great matchup. The Pirates strike out like 19% of the time against righties, and they've been hitting them really, really well this year. But he's only priced at 4,900, which is basically like a decent outfielder. And he's 3 of his 4 starts this year have been at home in Cincinnati, and he hasn't gotten blown up yet. So obviously it's not an ideal place to pitch, but he's been able to handle it so far this year. He pitched against the Pirates 2 starts ago at Pittsburgh. He went 6 innings, struck out 5, just had a decent outing. The main reason that I think he's in play today is the amount of risk that the mid-tier pitchers on this slate carry. In my opinion, there are no really safe options once you get outside of the top guys. So if you're trying to fit big bats into your GPP lineups, I don't think the opportunity cost is particularly high today to go like Strasburg, Straley compared to like Strasburg and your favorite $7,000 pitcher, because there's just no $7,000 guys that stand out like, oh, they're most likely going to get you 22 to 25 points. If Straley does what he's been doing and puts up 13 to 15 points, you're probably not losing that many raw points between him and whoever the popular $7,000 pitcher is, and you're going to have $3,000 or $2,000 more to spend on bats. Not to mention, the Pirates do hit righties well, but they're very right-handed heavy, and dating back to last year, Straley strikes out 26% of right-handed batters. So, there's reason to think that he'll have a little bit of success, or, at least like maintain what he did against the Pirates in his last start. So, that's a play that I definitely will be considering today, and I don't think I'm going to hate it. As far as teams that I want hitters from, it depends who's pitching for Arizona today. Everything says De La Rosa, but Fantasy Labs has Archie Bradley listed, so I'm not sure what that's about. If it's De La Rosa, I'm only interested in the Rockies lefties. If it's Bradley, I'm interested in all the Rockies. Coors Field still, it gets a lot of exposures, but it hasn't been as highly owned this year as it should be. So I definitely, want to go there. I really, really like Texas against Miguel Gonzalez. In Texas, that's just a great spot. And you can also play the White Sox hitters against Colby Lewis. Fly ball pitcher in Texas, gives up good amount of hard contact also. And then the Yankees are probably going to be my favorite GPP stack today. They haven't hit well all year. They're old. I don't think they're very good anymore. But they're facing Chris Young in Yankee Stadium, who against left-handed pitching dating back to last year, Chris Young gives up 55% fly ball rate with a 38% hard contact percentage. And he's like the king of getting fly balls to the warning track, but the warning track at most stadiums is past the outfield fence at Yankee Stadium. So I could see the Yankees, just having a breakout game today at very low ownership since they've been so cold and they're just usually not that popular anyway. So they're right now my favorite GPP stack that I think I'll be able to get at low ownership that could easily put up the same amount of runs as the more popular teams, like Colorado and Arizona or Texas. So that's what I'm thinking right now. Today's a day where a lot could change, like I said, just based on weather, seeing lineups once they come out. So definitely stop into the Slurve chat. a little later on, I'll be in there while I'm actually building my lineups, trying to answer some questions and see where I think the best plays are given the more information we'll have later on in the day. So definitely stop in the Slurve later, and good luck today, guys.